Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening if you're on the other side of the world. Welcome to Beyond the Outer Realm, the spin off show of the main show, The Outer Realm, which airs on Wednesday and Thursday evenings, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. So we are broadcasting live still on the United Public Radio Network. UFO Paranormal Radio Network 105.3 FM from the Gulf Coast, 107.7 FM from beautiful New Orleans. So today's a lot of fun. Aleksander Czeszkiewicz joins us again, and it's been a while since he's been on. He's been on a couple of times, and for those of you who may not be familiar with him, he is the author of a book. Deja Vu has everything already been. Fabulous book. Wrote it at 17. Yes, you heard right. 17. Translated it to English at 19. Yes. Knows his stuff. Interesting to listen to, versed in so many different things. And we're going to get the show on the road, and we're going to actually come into things that are being exposed now, which is going to be verifiable for him with a lot of stuff that he's, researched on. So anyway, without further ado, Aleksander, hello.
Hello, everyone listening. Thanks for having me on again. I really enjoyed last two conversation, but it's been a while, so
It has. It has. And you've just been so busy. Like you've just keep going with all of this incredible research that you're doing. So we're going to back up a bit. Hi, Heidi. We're going to back up a little bit and tell us a little bit, like just a bit of a recap for people who are just listening maybe to the first time about your book. What prompted you to write it? What's specific? At 17, you want to write a book that's like an encyclopedia.
thank you very much. Thanks for all the kind words about my book. What actually prompted me to start writing and exploring these topics was I was always a good student. My mom was a historian, later history teacher, so I had plenty of sources at my home. My dad always loved watching documentaries on TV like History Channel, Discovery, National Geographic, so I always had the basic knowledge of the science, how the universe works around it, etc. And what prompted me to go into onto an unconventional route, or what some people call alternative history, was that I was learning so much history for contests, competitions, etc. I needed to learn from the oldest prehistoric times, millions of years ago, of the hominids, how everything evolved into anatomically modern humans and so on, up until 1990s or recent times like that I started questioning stuff, and I started asking basic questions. How do we know that? How do we know that history turned out this way? How do we know all of this stuff about ancient Egypt, ancient Sumer, and so on? So I started just asking basic questions, and I see that very often people when especially they're learning at school or for some kind of school competitions, they are not asking such questions. They are just learning, to get good grades or good places at such competitions. But I think what's the most important at any kind of learning, either at school or privately or at the university, is to ask about the basics. How do we know that? How do we know if it's true? Being a little bit of a philosopher even. And I started researching it deeper and deeper, and I started seeing huge gaps in our history. I started seeing that we do not know actually that much about it, despite this huge big picture about how it looks like from the early hominids up until nowadays. It has plenty of gaps inside of this thinking. Plenty of assumptions are being made on just a little bit of evidence that, in my opinion, is not enough, to show that, oh, here are 2 or 3 sources and we create a narrative on these sources. So that's how I started all of that. And then, because I started seeing these gaps, I researched more what our ancestors were thinking about our history, because of course they were much closer to the prehistoric or the ancient times than we are today. So that's how it all started.
Wow. It's very difficult because you get into these rabbit holes and you realize that, what got missed, but why did it get missed? Do you feel like I always think about, all of these resets that have happened throughout millennia, resetting history, um, and stuff just being either misinterpreted. So many linguists have tried to interpret language. Maybe it's just misinterpretation, or it's not mistranslation, lost in translation, or it's just plain kept from us. So why do you think these huge gaps from what
I
you?
think that the basic thing, and I actually start my book here if someone want to, see how it looks like. I cannot, zoom it, unfortunately. Deja vu, has
Yeah.
everything already been? And actually the title, has everything already been, alludes to the idea that what if most of the things that we know about our modern civilization, what if everything has already been, and,
Yeah.
things are repeating, cycles of destruction and rise and falls of civilizations. And I actually start my book with this idea, how much evidence lasts for, let's say, a few thousand years? How much evidence from our modern advanced civilization would last, let's
Mm-hmm.
say, next 10,000 years or more? And actually it turns out that very, very little. And I think that the biggest thing about our history, which is, in comparison to other sciences, let's say biology or physics, in which you can replicate at any given time an experiment, in history you cannot, because, history passed. And
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing about our history, why we do not know much about it, is lack of evidence and
Mhm.
lack of things that survive from prehistory, from ancient Sumer. And interestingly, I started last year, a few months ago, I started bachelor degree at the university in history.
Mhm.
And the more and more I'm learning academic stuff right now, because I'm focusing right now on the academic stuff because of that, but it, complements my own alternative research,
Mhm.
that the more I'm learning, the more I see evidence for what I've been talking many years ago in my book and, in all my research, that we do not know much about our history, that there are huge gaps, that there is no evidence, even when it comes to times like ancient Egyptian one, ancient Sumerian one, that only little things survived
Mhm.
till, and throughout the millennia. The same with our modern civilization. We are threatened everywhere that, all of these things, all of the trash we are creating as humanity, it's all bad for the environment. Of course it's bad, but when it comes to a historical analysis, let's say 10,000 years from now, what would last? It's, just, let's say,
Mm.
3% or something like that, only a little bit, because most of the metals, most of the plastics, and most of the things
Mhm.
that are symptoms of our modern society, modern civilization are.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh, we're
And just, why do we know if it's degrading in such.
oh, frozen. Having a bit of an internet.
Wait,
Oh, and you're back.
sorry. I have a cable internet and it never goes down. I'm having so many interviews, and today, it's paranormal stuff or something, because, it's crazy for me.
It's okay. It's okay. We're keeping up. We're keeping up.
Yeah, but, sorry, but,
Yeah.
why do we know things from, let's say, ancient and prehistoric times? Why do we know, let's say, why do we have even remnants from people millions of years ago, from these hominids, our ancestors?
Mhm.
Because these are natural materials, like stone, like wood, like ceramics in some cases, but the more actually artificial the thing is, the less time it lasts. So I would say
Mhm.
that from our modern perspective, in 10,000 years, we would have like about 5% of all the remnants of our highly advanced global civilization. So
Mhm.
imagine if scientists assume Earth is about, let's say, 2 billion years old. So imagine, how much about
Mm.
these deepest past of our planet we do not know. So yeah, this is the
Mhm.
biggest thing. And I remember, it's been like 5 or 6 years since the publishing of my book, and I remember early critics saying that this is the biggest BS I'm telling, that there would be no remnants. No, we have so many of them. But actually, the more I'm learning of the, advanced academic stuff at a very high level, the more I see confirmation of my theories that, we do not know much. And even if we look at historical examples for instance, ancient Sumer or ancient Egypt, we see that, for instance, we have huge blank spaces of no evidence for hundreds of years during their history. And sometimes it's just our luck that, for instance, one Sumerian city was completely burned down, and the clay tablets, we know how fragile is
Yes.
clay, but these clay tablets were being burned with the entire city, and that's why we know so much of them from, let's say, this period. But at the same time, we know from these sources there were about 30 such big cities as the one that was burned down completely. So imagine how little do we know even about this period, and the same comes for
Everything
ancient
burned.
Egypt and others. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The Library of Alexandria. I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
that was a wealth of knowledge. How many locations were there like that? But how much, in your opinion, sits in private collections? Or let's say even, you have some of the older families, throughout the world who may have private libraries that we don't have access to. So how much sits in the private sector, do you think?
I think a lot, because when you see the first excavations, the first modern, of course,
Yeah.
excavations in the 1800s, late 1700s, and early 1900s, it was, like Indiana Jones to some extent. There were
Yeah.
no methods. Just as nowadays we see archaeologists being these boring people, just, excavating very slowly things. In the past, it was different. Only in
Mm.
the late 1800s, such scientific methods came around, and before that, okay, let's use dynamite and let's explore this
Just no
monument or
thought.
something. We
Yeah,
don't care if we destroy something, we only care about gold or something. And it was very, in the 1800s, very popular for people,
it was.
even tourists,
Yes.
very very rich tourists going into Mesopotamia, going into Egypt, and buying from the local people who were selling these things. And
Yeah,
even recently, let's say 30, 20 years ago, it
yeah.
was very common for Egyptians or other people to
To be
sell
selling,
what
people are
they, yeah,
coming
found.
everywhere and taking artifacts. I mean, it's how some of the best artifacts in the world are moved. In fact, a friend of mine had bought a museum
Wow.
here in Canada, and it turned out there were 8 mummies in it. One was King Ramses the First. So he, in turn, had sold 6 of them to the museum in Atlanta, and one of them they recognized right away because of the crossing of the arms that it was a royal mummy. And of course, they reached out to Dr. Zahi Hawass, who goes, I know that's a Ramses, like the Ramsey
Hmm.
mummy. I know it, but I can tell by the features. I'm thinking, how? But anyway, he knew, and he was the first mummy to ever be issued a passport to be
Yeah,
sent
yeah.
home. And so it's incredible how so many of these artifacts from different cultures ended up in museums all over the world. The Victorians, I think, went through this stage where they were infatuated with death and the macabre
Yes.
and having old artifacts or old mummies, which is one of
Yes,
those.
yes.
But I
Even when
mean,
it comes, not to private collections, but to the museums, it's a fact, and you can learn at, most advanced textbooks about that, that even in the museums, what is being shown, and even, because one part is what's being shown. It's a little bit always because, you
yes,
don't have unlimited space to show everything, but even
yes,
what was, described by archaeologists and historians is, let's say, only 20% of everything that sits in the, deep underground or somewhere in the museums or in other,
yeah. There's still
places.
royal mummies missing.
Yeah.
Nefertari, the royal
Hmm.
wife of King Ramses, never been found. Nefertiti, I think they have an idea where she is now, I think, but I don't know that they've actually validated that.
Hmm.
So, I mean,
Yes. The
if
same
you
with
could,
untranslated texts, there are plenty of
yeah.
them.
Well, if you can do that with mummies, you can imagine what you could do with, for example, clay tablets or amulets or figures, things like that that you
Or
could
gold.
possibly.
You immediately, get it and, burn it down to get, some money.
Yes, especially that. So you basically have been researching a lot of new stuff since you and I have last spoken. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Yes, exactly. And it's not only connected, but mostly connected, for in me being, at the university for the last few months. And I am, again, really shocked, positively shocked that the more I'm learning, official academic stuff, the more I see confirmations of the alternative or the fringe theories, as they are very often called. And what I'm seeing is that plenty of internet debunkers, we see them everywhere on YouTube, on social media, Facebook groups, and so on. Even some of them have academic credentials in archaeology, history, or something. These are people just as in politics. Some are louder, some are not, and they do not represent the what is official. Actually, academia, they are representing just one part of interpreting what official history is, or what the truth about our history is. And I was positively shocked that we in our books are learning advanced textbooks, academic books, etc. I've read last months were really intense when it comes to academic research, when it comes to my own life. And I was shocked how in these textbooks you finally see that they are agreeing, yeah, we do not know much about that. Yeah, it's only little evidence and we are making assumptions based on these, few artifacts we found. So finally at this level I see, I'm positively shocked about that. The same with other topics. And when it comes to, these confirmations of what I'm talking about and what I've been talking about for years now, and what confirmations I see, for instance, for years I've been saying that, anatomically modern humans, according to geneticists, appeared about 200,000 years ago. And our
That's
recorded history is about 5 to 7 years old, 5 to 7,000 years old. So you see, it's like 5%, 3% of our lifetime existence as anatomically modern humans. But what is more is that we are taking the roots of our species back and back again, not by thousands of years, but by hundreds of thousands of years. And as I said, about 5 years ago, when I was writing my book, it was 200,000 years for anatomically modern humans. And right now, it's conservatively speaking and academically speaking, 315,000. So more than half of it, again, going back more than 50%. And it's even accepted that we do not know much about this idea, and that most probably anatomically modern humans, went diverged from other hominids about 500,000 years ago. So about 500,000 years ago of existence of anatomically modern humans, and only 5, 7, 8 maybe thousand years of history. It's crazy when we see that.
It's insane. Carrie's asking, because you mentioned the Queen Mother of Humans, if you can expand on that.
Queen Mother of
Humans.
Queen Mother of Humans. I mentioned that anatomically modern humans, not like Queen Mother. I don't know what's
Oh, okay.
meant by that.
Queen
Sorry,
of Humans.
I don't,
Okay.
that
Yeah,
we as
didn't hear
species,
it.
are
Yeah.
200,
Yeah.
315,
Yes.
half a million years ago. Sorry, maybe,
Yeah.
I will try to talk more clearly, maybe,
No, that's okay.
about
It's
these
okay.
topics. Yeah, I hope.
Yeah. No, it's okay. I think, I
Yeah,
heard it. Just asked
but
it.
the same with, taking back the roots of civilization. It was crazy,
Misunderstood.
when we are thinking about Atlantis, talking about Atlantis, academics, no, there was no Atlantis. But right now, we, even in the academic realm, we are taking the roots of civilization back by thousands of years. It was commonly mentioned that, let's say, ancient Sumerians began about 3,500 BC, at maximum 4,000 BC approximately. But right now it is accepted that, okay, this is the first time that the Sumerians were using script. But actually, thousands of years before that, from about 5,000 years BC, so more than 1,000 years before the commonly accepted version of where Sumerians began, Sumerians were already as much advanced. But we just, as modern humans, do not have evidence that they used script, and script is needed for some kind of culture to be accepted as a civilization. So if there was a huge civilization, but they didn't use any kind of writing, any kind of script, it wouldn't be called a civilization, even if it was like millions of people or something.
Oh,
That's why we accept that Sumerians began 3500 BC, but thousands of years before that, they still had huge cities and huge culture, huge things that we would call civilization. The
yeah.
same with, modern discoveries in the last 10, 15 years. We see a few, it's called archaeological cultures because, again, we cannot name it a civilization, but they are of a size of ancient Sumerian cities of about more than 30,000 people. And ancient Sumerian cities, in their greatness, highness, had about 30 to 50,000 people in their cities. So we are speaking
That's
about
substantial. Yeah.
they are called proto-civilizations, more than 1,000 years before the Sumerians in Eastern Europe. Nearby me, a little bit, on the northern side, like Serbia, Romania, maybe parts of Ukraine, regions like that. We are thinking more than 1,000 years before the Sumerians. Cities that were as big as the Sumerian ones in the later times, but they had something that looks like script, but just because academics haven't deciphered this script yet, they cannot call it a script. So this is the biggest problem. If they translated it, they could call it a script, and then it would be called a civilization, but we cannot do that. So it's all about bureaucracy, and all about schemas that we are unable to call these civilizations. But we find even in the academic realm, not like in the alternative archaeology, Atlantis stuff and things like that, that history and civilization is much, much older. Even when it comes to Neolithic revolution, first cities and stuff like that, we are pushing the dates back by thousands of years. Even in some cases we see that some cities in ancient Mesopotamia more than 10,000 years ago were advanced. We would call them civilization cities, but we cannot because, for instance, they had such abundance of fish that they weren't using agriculture as the basis of society. And because of that, we cannot say that they were civilization or that they were cities. So it's crazy to me, but they were huge, huge cities. But just
like
because there was
a
abundance...
society. Yeah,
Yes,
because who
culture.
decides they're not called a civilization? Academia? Academia says we can't say you're a civilization because we can't,
Yeah,
So I mean, yeah,
crazy.
it gets really, convoluted at the academic level, I think.
Yeah.
But I mean, there are things that surface that have you been able to place, and you may or may not know, but how about all of these out of place artifacts that have been found, and people look at them and go, where does this come from? Because they're dating it to be so far back, and they can't place it to any specific, so we say, civilization or culture or
Yeah.
group,
Yeah, I agree. The problem with, it's called forbidden archaeology, after Michael Crema and others who started that, I think they did an
Yeah.
amazing job. But the
Yes.
problem is, first, it's very often hard to date these things, the same as it's hard for us even to date,
Yes.
early prehistoric and, ancient times. So it's very hard to date. And sometimes, there is a huge critique that, it's not that easy to date for 300 million years or something. The
Yes.
same, some of these artifacts were officially, let's say, completely debunked to be fake, and just because of that, most academics are saying, okay, so some were debunked. It's called very often in science Occam's razors, that if you have a good, it's not like that, but you very often interpret it like that in science, that if you have a very good explanation for, let's say, 90% of the things, don't bother with the 10%. And it's with all the philosophy of science, of the famous paradigm shifts in science, that it goes like this in history, that because we had plenty of different paradigms, both about our history, about physics, chemistry, biology, and there was, right now we know how it comes about, that these anomalies we start to gather more and more of these anomalies, like, let's say, 300 million year old artifact or something, that they start to debunk the current paradigm. But right now, there seems to be a lot of them, but still, in comparison, to other, let's say, mainstream sources, it's too little for the mainstream, to switch and change the paradigm about, humans or any, because we even do not know if it were humans who, let's assume that some of these artifacts are real and they are dated truly to millions of years ago, hundreds of millions of years ago.
Yes.
We do not
Yeah.
know even if these were humans. I very often say the same thing with the giants. Even from the academic perspective, you cannot deny that giants never existed, because right now we are finding even more and more hominids with whom we coexisted. Again, 3 years ago, I was saying that we as anatomically modern humans coexisted on our planet about 80,000 years ago, if I remember correctly, with 5 other hominid species. But we are finding more and more of them. And even academics are saying that it's strange, because right now it's the only time in history of the Earth, in humans' history, that we are alone as a species, advanced species, because, 50,000 years ago, 80,000 years ago, we were coexisting with others like Neanderthals, or even other crazy ones like Homo floresiensis, who are 1 meter tall
Little
hobbits.
people. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
so why it's impossible, and you immediately as academics debunk that there were giants, maybe we haven't found
You know what?
all
How
of
can
them.
you debunk it? I mean, the American soldiers in, what was it, Afghanistan,
Yeah.
just a few years back, the Kandahar giant, like, I mean, they took one down. There's still sightings, in Italy, where they're seeing really large ones. And there are Native American museums that have, depictions of
Yeah.
giants. Like, I mean,
Or the famous Smithsonian cover-up.
they dumped them all in the ocean. I know. So I guess
Just as in, if we want a little bit of conspiracy theories, just as in the case of the Transformers film, what they did after the first battle, I think in the first movie, they put, the remnants in the ocean, and there were no Transformers after 5 or 20 years. It was, fake and everything.
That's right.
The same, we cannot probably talk about that. I don't want even to talk about it, but
I
the
know.
E-files, yesterday or today, Epstein files and stuff like that.
It's
Conspiracy theories turned out to be right about plenty of things.
Well, yeah, unfortunately, it's just like an alternate truth. But I think with that was going to be one of my questions is, we have these governments, for example, the giants, that they suppressed the truth about giants. And there's, Egyptian governments have been accused of covering up information about some of its monuments. So you just look at, some of the ancient technology, and I always find the tomb of King Seti I to be fascinating, where they have what's allegedly is a boat. Another one is like an airplane or a helicopter, and you see different, cave art or petroglyphs throughout the world, or hieroglyphs that show signs of something very advanced. And yet,
Or aliens.
Yes, I think you start to see that. And look at what's happening in Egypt now. You see everything that's being, because, and I get it, technology. We have technology now that is helping us to just make these discoveries. But I remember seeing an interview with Dr. Zahi Hawass in the 70s stating structures and tunnels under the pyramid. And all of a sudden it shows up like a year or two ago going, oh, hey, look what we found. I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I'm old. I know. I remember seeing this stuff. So, why do you think all the cover-ups?
I don't know specifically. Maybe it's so advanced, lost knowledge of
theory.
the ancients, prehistorian
Yeah.
Atlanteans, or the aliens that would completely, change everything. Or maybe free us, when it comes even to spiritual levels and plenty of occult esoteric knowledge, that maybe it would enable us to be, free from the matrix. We'll see, all of the falsehoods and, the government, Illuminati, or secret societies want us to be closed. I think even, my own little conspiracy theory of all times, very shortly, is that the evolution of religion from, let's say, primitive shamanistic beliefs in which humans were free and were, having some kind of interactions with spirits of nature, then, the first polytheistic religion, first cage, but a big one that, okay, there are many gods, but many gods but nothing more. Then monotheistic religion, you won't have any gods besides me, so another smaller
It changed.
cage. And
Yes.
right now the atheistic cage and scientism cage, naturalism, materialism, the biggest cage. Okay, there is no spirituality because, from being free then to being a little bit limited by religion, but still in religions there is some kind of spiritual aspect that you are much more than just biological machine. And right now the scientific revolution, atheism, materialism, no, there is nothing more, so you're just biological machines, so you better just maybe have fun, have no like bigger goals, have no like morals or something. Let's max out some kind of dopamine or some
Oh,
other
yeah. Oh,
evolutionary stuff, and that's the way
yeah.
of life. So I think it's the getting as the bigger and bigger cage. And actually I was researching it historically speaking and philosophically, sociologically, that plenty of huge minds throughout the last 2 centuries were talking about that, maybe not from conspiracy level thinking, but from just philosophical social thinking, that humans have put on them a huge cage. It was very often called the iron cage, that there is no god, there is no spirituality. And right now, and they even told plenty of people, there was Max Weber, even Karl Marx and others, that that it was before the war, they were living before the wars, they said that there would be huge conflict. Even famous Nietzsche with his super uberman, etc., this idea was about that when humans are denying God or spirituality, they are so selfish, they need to become, they need to invent something different than that, to give, not to be empty in themselves, something like that. But they even talked about that denying existence of spirituality will be a huge detriment in human society, and I believe that.
I believe that as well. I think it has to be a balance. There's questions and comments for you. Your research points to humanity having far older chapters with new discoveries pushing complex behavior back 500,000 years. How does that align with the lost history timeline that you present?
That there is more and more possibility of lost civilizations, for instance, like Atlantis, that were, in the 70s, 60s, 80s, completely, no, there was no Atlantis. The main argument was that we do not have evidence that humans were advanced enough during the Atlantean times, 10,000 BC, 9,000 BC, to create that, so it's just a fairy tale. But then in the 1994, 1995, we discovered, for instance, Göbekli Tepe. And right now we are discovering more and more prehistoric sites that are pointing to advanced human societies dating back to 10,000 BC. So we see
Yes.
that Atlantis, just as the case of giants we talked about in a moment, that even this case of Atlantis can be that you cannot that easily deny that as a skeptic, because there is huge possibility. Let's say, okay, we haven't found it yet, there are some
Maybe
possibilities.
there's multiple cultures that fell under that umbrella. I think
Yeah, we
Michael Le
can talk
Flem
about
spoke
Atlantis
that too.
because there are huge new discoveries in a moment. But when it comes to answering these questions, that
Yes.
lost history, stuff like lost civilizations, Lemuria, Mu Atlantis, and other kind of fairy tales, even the famous Sumerian kings list are becoming more
Yes.
and more right about what they are talking about, because we have been finding over the last, let's say, 30 years that the more and more people listed in this king's list, despite being mythological, were real rulers. Because we found in some kind of Sumerian ruin, they are called tells there, that there is a mention of this king, that he was real and he ruled this city, and it was in the Sumerian king's list, so it was right. So yeah, it's becoming obvious that what we called alternative history, lost history, even ancient
Yes.
aliens to some extent, that it's becoming more and more real with these ideas of pushing back the dates of civilization. Even news from last year, from December, very new stuff. There was an archaeologist, very conservative, as you know, when it comes to the academic realm, Irving Finkel, on Lex Friedman podcast, and he mentioned that it's his own controversial theory. He has only one because he's very conservative one, that he believes that writing began at Göbekli Tepe 9,600 years BC during the times of Atlantis. And he showed that we found stones which are like stamps because they have some kind of letters or something engraved on them, proto writing or something, and he believes that, okay, we have a few of these stones. We do not know, we haven't again deciphered the language, so we cannot say it's official language.
We
but
don't know.
he believes, yeah, exactly. But he believes that these were used as stamps, and just as I mentioned the, example that we have plenty of, let's say, tens of thousands of clay tablets from the burned city, but from 30 others that were in the same times at this moment in history, we do not have almost any from these cities, and they were of equal almost size. So this is the same idea that we do not have any remnants of these clay tablets that were used at Göbekli Tepe, but these stones were used as stamps. So when more and more conservative people are telling that, okay, history began much older than that, maybe writing civilization.
There are several like Göbekli, like several
Yes.
tepes, like, and they just found one, like, what was it, in the last couple of years that they think is older.
Karahan Yeah, Karahan Tepe, for instance. And interesting things about all of these tepes, like Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, is that, again, we cannot call it civilization. We even cannot call it a sedentary lifestyle, because it's approximately a little bit before or during the times of the Neolithic Revolution. At the end of the last ice age, the climate was better, so people switched because there was abundance of food. They switched from being, for hundreds of thousands, and before that for millions of years, hunter-gatherers, cavemen.
Nomads.
They switched. Yes, nomads. They switched to the sedentary lifestyle. But we cannot even say that Göbekli Tepe was sedentary lifestyle, because these people were hunter-gatherers. So according to science, they were cavemen that were building megalithic huge structures. So this is the idea. And that's why we cannot call them our earlier civilization or something. But we are getting, again, I see that every day I'm learning, for the university stuff, prehistory, ancient history, that we are, even conservative people are taking the roots of everything back again. I remember reading, like a few weeks ago, a book from 2004, so a little bit more than 20 years ago. And it was set in that I was laughing very hard. It was like, it's a very good, like, academic textbook. And it said, anatomically modern human appeared about 50,000 years ago. At maximum 100,000 years ago. And I was laughing very hard, because now we know that 300, 200,000 at least. So you see how we were changing that. And the same thing in my book, I was showing that until 1840s, less than 200 years ago, we knew almost nothing about Mesopotamia, Sumer, any kind of civilization or city in this region, which is now basic knowledge, common knowledge, that Sumerians were the first civilizations. But before the 1840s, we knew nothing. The same with Egypt before Napoleon's expeditions in the late 1700s, early 1800s. We knew nothing about ancient Egyptian one. It wasn't even within our paradigm. And I was heavily criticized. I remember it both in Poland and abroad. I was heavily criticized in that. Right now, I'm having a little bit of specialization in ancient Middle East. And I can, quote plenty of academic books telling that, yes, until 18, to be exact, 43, we knew almost nothing about Mesopotamian cities. And I compare it to the case of Atlantis, that, okay, we have Plato's story, we have a few minor sources outside of Plato, but we haven't found it yet, so scientists are telling, no, Atlantis didn't exist. But the same was with Mesopotamia before 1840s, less than 200 years ago. We had plenty of mentions of Mesopotamian cities. Abraham in the Bible came from the Sumerian city of Ur, which we later found out to be real. Even ancient
Come back. And we're frozen right in the middle of the good stuff.
in
There we are.
Mesopotamia. But we didn't have any evidence. But in the 1840s, we started, in like just a few years, found that there were huge civilizations there. So I compare it with the story of Atlantis, that in the 1840s, we have had plenty of mentions of Sumerian or ancient Mesopotamian cities, but we didn't have any evidence for them. So before we dug them up, we again were telling, oh, these are just mythological cities, mythological civilizations. It was less than 200 years ago. So I think the same with Atlantis in 50 or let's say maybe 100 years, to be pessimistic about it. We will see that maybe not exactly Atlantis, okay, as it's portrayed by Plato, was real, but at least the idea of Atlantis, such a civilization, was.
Yeah, I tend to think that there are people who are now, I think, delving more into the Atlantis theory, that it was more than just one location specifically, that because there are too many similarities that have spread out throughout, like not just the ancient world, but I mean even here into the West. So it's starting to look like it could very well be something, much like the Teples, who, however, being nomads, not so much seafaring, were all in one area, which I find interesting. And I was going to ask you from an academic standpoint, um, aside from like why would cultures bury these monuments? They would bury their own monuments, but why is archaeology so limited? Like Göbekli Tepe, I think they even planted trees over for a while, and the whole archaeological world was going, "Are you crazy? You're going to destroy whatever's underneath," and then the trees were removed. But
Yeah, there was conspiracy around Göbekli Tepe in the last 2 years with
yeah,
connections with the World Economic Forum and stuff
oh,
like that. And yes, exactly. They said, oh, it was accidental, or oh, they said that these trees
mm,
won't damage that, or even there was one idea that they were trying to explain this situation, that oh, some kind of other people planted these trees on this site, independently, or archaeologists or something. I think there was something going on at Göbekli Tepe with World Economic Forum saying those were huge slogans of them that oh, we will leave these discoveries for future generations and stuff like that.
right.
And from one point of view, okay, if we have in 20 years better technology to excavate all of that, let's say some kind like lidar or something that would enable us to know more, okay, let's leave it for a moment. But
Mm.
I see all over the world excavations are going on and no one is thinking like that, and everyone is thinking that
Yes.
we know so much about, we have so many archaeological methods that are very good at
Mm.
telling us what was going on, that we do not need to wait 20 or 30
So
years.
what are your thoughts? Why do you think they would why did the original people bury it, and why are people not wanting to excavate it to its full potential? Why try to cover up? Could it be that there's something like a technology, even just on in writing, that they're trying to hide? Like, why do you think?
Yeah, from the modern perspective about this conspiracy, I think that, and it is commonly archaeologically accepted that what we excavated at Göbekli Tepe is like 5 to 10% of everything, and more such megalithic
Yeah.
structures are still beneath the earth. So maybe they know something
Mhm.
about it. Maybe they scan that. There are scan lidar and other
Yeah.
technologies to do that. So maybe they've seen something. Oh no, we won't show it publicly to others. So I think from the modern perspective, it can be like that. And why? Maybe there is some kind of technology, as you mentioned, or maybe there is no technology, but maybe the idea, because again, we are talking about World Economic Forum, we are talking about these cages on
Oh, it could be
humanity.
spiritual, something
Yeah,
substantial, I guess should have been a
yes,
better way to word it, like,
exactly. It can be technology, like
sure.
materialistic one, it can be spiritual one, but I
Yeah.
think even from a propaganda ideological perspective,
Mhm.
the belief that oh, it was everything evolutionary, because most of the evils in the last 200 years came from the materialistic propaganda, from the evolutionarism. All the communism
Mhm.
was about the struggle of the classes, evolution, materialism, and stuff like that. And I believe that maybe there was even finding that history, civilization is older, that maybe people, let's say that they were hunter gatherers, maybe they were living happily, maybe they were living in advanced manner, but they were just having different nomadic lifestyle because it was easier for them.
Mhm.
Maybe even it can be ideological, that it could shatter the view of slow evolution or civilizations being only
Mhm.
5,000 years old, and it could shatter even this evolutionary approach. Maybe too much would be uncovered, or maybe it would lead to conspiracy theorists and alternative research again to be right. So
Mhm.
maybe people like let's say casual people who are listening only to the mainstream and stuff like that, maybe casual people will see, okay, every one of the conspiracy theories, fringe people, and so many bad names
Yeah, it's
as they
happening.
called,
Yes.
tinfoil hat people, they were
Yeah.
all right all along. So maybe they are
Mhm.
also right about the government, or maybe they're also
Oh,
right
yeah.
about that we are more than material human beings, just biological machines. So I think even from ideological perspective of having people in control, it could be dangerous. Even let's say there is no technology, at Göbekli Tepe. So this is from the modern times, but from the ancient ones, there is this idea of the burial. But there are also I've seen alternative theories that it wasn't intentional burial. Maybe it was some natural, maybe
Well,
catastrophe, or
some
maybe
people
no
suggest
catastrophe.
cataclysm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
What is interesting, I've been really into, how recently over the last few months, how science works. I wanted to more understand it as I was seeing more and more confirmation of my speculation, as it was called before. And I've
Yes.
seen, for instance, right now or very recently, there were excavations at the Sumerian city of Ur or Uruk, I don't remember correctly, at 22 meters. And they could date what they were digging at 22 meters below ground, that it was about 2000 something BC, because they were finding plenty of texts that were telling about, this day or this king or something. So they could very well date this 22-meter deep layer at 2000 or something BC about. So imagine the Atlantean layer, how beneath the earth is that,
Oh, yeah,
or the
absolutely.
idea of what we've been talking about a lot, and what I'm talking about a lot in my book about the ending of the last ice age, which is a fact. Let's say, okay, academics are not saying there was a cataclysm; they are not accepting that, and younger Dryas impact hypothesis and other catastrophe theories are crazy or something. But still, there is a fact that from the end of the last ice age up until the ancient times of ancient Greece or ancient Egypt, the sea levels rose 120 meters, which is like a skyscraper. So imagine being right now on the beach and you're seeing a skyscraper tall water, this is the sea level change. So I imagine that most of our current cities, if there was right now such a sea level change, would be completely underwater. Let's say 20% of our modern civilization, because most of our cities are near some kind of either, seas, oceans, or some kind of lakes, or any kind of water reservoirs. I think that, 20% of our civilization right now would immediately vanish because it's on the coastline or in other close areas to water. So imagine,
We've lost entire continents,
yeah.
right,
We
under the
lost,
ocean.
huge areas of lands, more than modern, I think, North America, including Alaska, Canada, Mexico. So imagine how much land all over the world since the end of the last ice age we lost. Huge potential when it comes to Atlantis, as described by Plato as being relatively small city, maybe a little bigger island, 9600 BC. Huge potential, I see. And we are seeing more and more confirmation of what Graham Hancock was saying, what conspiracy theorists were saying, and, other alternative researchers. We are seeing more and more confirmation of that.
Well, I mean, you can see some of the evidence. For example, in Lake Michigan, there is a small version of a Stonehenge, and right beside it is this huge boulder with like some kind of a drawing of a mastodon. So this happened pre-Ice Age, and now it's
Yeah.
under Lake Michigan. So it's interesting how some of this surfaces. And I also remember a friend of
Or
mine.
under Lake Van in Turkey, famous expeditions recently. I think last year it was Matthew Lacroix, Paul Wallis, and plenty of other, even Robert Shaw from
Yeah,
the famous Sphinx theory.
yeah,
They were searching, there are huge megaliths similar to Sacsayhuaman, all these Peru megalithic mosaics,
yes.
polygonal walls. The same thing is there, and you see some of the walls above, the water, nearby the lake. There are plenty of such. They are exactly similar, almost the same to the Peruvian ones, and we were talking about Turkey on the other side of the world, but the same ones that they were diving there are, under the water in the Lake Van.
So it goes to show. I had a friend of mine who had a friend who was diving off the coast of the UK and came across a city and found a version of a Baghdad battery. Anyway, when he had asked at the time, only the US military had a satellite, and they did a satellite imagery of that. He had to pay for that. And all of a sudden, he was visited. We talked by conspiracy, men in black, and told never to dive it again. So
Yeah.
I think there's still so much
Yeah,
suppressed
over
stuff.
the last 2 years, I even,
Yeah.
found similar stories here in Poland of my friends or people I know,
Mm,
from the space, interested people in ancient
yeah.
history. I know some people who went as a group to a casual tourist location. It's a hill, but again, there is a chapel on a hill, and, conspiracy theorists are saying that below, in this hill or mountain below the, let's say, medieval chapels are some prehistoric ones or something. And,
Ah,
this is conspiracy theories. And they went, and they weren't doing anything crazy. They went with some kind of tools, but it wasn't like LiDAR or something, but they were,
yeah.
trying to find something as an amateur, let's say, as
Hmm.
amateurs. And
Hmm.
there were plenty of tourists back there. It was, summer, everything was fine, plenty of people, smiling, happy, loud, etc. And they've seen first that a few strange people who were looking like undercover cops or
Mm.
something were, around them and only around them. And, they specifically moved away from this place to the other. And again, they were around them. And then one of them went to, the main person who was leading this group and said that you better not do that because you may be, your life may be in danger, not like threatening, but again,
No, but
a little bit fishy. So even
yeah.
I see the same things here in Poland, or there are some underground, again, monuments under, again, another but different one, medieval chapel that, according to conspiracy theories, are from prehistoric kingdoms, huge civilizations of Poland. And everyone
Yeah.
was, no, it's crazy. And again, but, one person, because of his, contacts, was able to go and he recorded. And I was, when we are talking on my channel with the man who was researching these things, we showed the true footage from this underground, and it's like huge underground chapels or something, like, I don't know, Notre Dame, but below the ground. And you see like these columns, and you see,
It
maybe
sounds
it's
like a
not.
Tartaria thing, to be honest.
Yeah,
It's a
it's here
whole,
called like Great
yeah,
Lechia Empire or something like
yeah,
that. Before that, prehistoric times, before
yeah.
even
Oh,
ancient times. But
so even
there was
older. Yeah.
something here before. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I completely believe that. Okay, I'm going to start get we have a lot of comments and questions. Um, so Herb says not allowed to dive again. He goes, I met an underwater archaeologist a couple of summers back who did a lot of dives near Jerusalem. He's convinced that 800 to 1,000 years have been added to our timeline based on things that were found. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all. Yeah, I don't doubt it. Then he goes on to say, I saw a scan of Greenland. There's a lot coming up with that too yesterday that showed
Mm-hmm.
a whole middle section is water. Kind of made me think for a second, what if Greenland was Atlantis? Because of the way it's shaped. Yeah, it's possible. There's a lot of stuff with Greenland, like down
Yeah.
to UFOs, to secret hidden bases, and
Yeah. When
oh
it
my
comes to
gosh.
Atlantis, because that may be interesting to our viewers, when it comes to Atlantis, recently there were a few, no, over 10 to 15 years, there have been a few very good points when it comes to a possible location of Atlantis, the famous Richard structure, which
Yeah,
right now there are a
yes.
few expeditions, amateur again, unfortunately, but maybe good that not official because they would hide something, but expeditions who are showing that, these geological formations around the Eye of the Sahara, the Richard
I have
structures,
someone
are
who's done a
strange.
couple of
Yeah.
times to talk about it.
We,
He's been there a few times. It's and have been researching it. Makes
yeah.
he makes very good points. So, it is like when you say these geological structures, you're looking at the layout, you're going, it's probably one of the only places that have been found that looks like that. But then there's so many
Yeah.
other people who lean towards the Azores, underwater of the
Yeah,
Azores.
but
That's very compelling.
okay, let's say Rishad in Sahara, Azores, and right now I know Michael Donovan who is researching, and he's making documentaries about Atlantis in Cadiz in Spain, so more
Mm,
closer to
okay.
Europe, and he's finding some structures that are coming out of the water nearby, the shores of the
Mhm,
Spain, and I
mhm.
think from Plato's perspective, he's telling us that Atlantis was not a single city. He's describing us this
Yes.
layout of this main city, but he's mentioning even there that Atlantis was some kind of maritime civilization. He's mentioning exactly that Atlantis had
Yeah.
its influences, colonies over the entire Mediterranean Sea, over Italy, and
Yes.
over even Egypt, that Egypt was one of the colonies of Atlantis. So I
Yes.
think that all of the
Yes.
locations, Sahara, the Richard structure,
Well, I think it started with what ancient Thera in Santorini. I've been there. It's compelling, but I don't think it has all the features that there. I just think it was just,
yeah, but it's, very late when it comes to the times,
yeah, it's
Yeah,
fascinating.
it's accepted, in the academic circles that Plato's story is just a fairy tale, just his imagination, his fantasy, and he was inspired by the Thera volcano story. So, yeah,
Yes.
it is, it may be, but even when it comes, okay, right now to what I'm doing, when it comes to academic research, I'm trying to find, and I think I'm on a good way to academically show that at least Plato is having sources from Egypt. And how I'm doing that is comparing historiography, which is, this crazy word, but it's just how different cultures viewed their history. So modern historiography is how we view our history. So the mainstream paradigm. Mesopotamian historiography would be the Sumerian kings list, how they viewed their past. The Egyptian one would be the Egyptian kings list. And interestingly, in Greece, there is, nothing comparable in their ideas to what Plato is telling us. So we can say with high confidence that he was, taking at least inspiration from ancient Egypt. And again, we are, I think, talking about Atlantis like a year ago or something, that, Egyptian sources are very similar to Plato's description of Atlantis. And again, in Greek historiography, so how ancient Greeks viewed history that was before them, they don't have any tradition that looks like the Atlantean ones, that first there was this god, then there were these different lineages of Atlantean rulers, and so on and so forth. So we can say that it's much closer to how Egyptians view their world. So we can say, okay, if Plato is telling us that Solon went to Egypt and there he found the story of Atlantis, we are right now, due to our research, being more and more confident that yes, Plato's Atlantis had Egyptian origins. And okay, we haven't found yet an exactly similar story that there was this island like Atlantis in Egyptian records, but we have plenty of similar ones that may be telling us about that. So
Well,
I think
We'll
that
just be south
I
of
will be
Egypt,
researching it this year. I won't, because again, I was positively shocked. I gave my book to a few of doctors, professors at my university, and they said, okay, they do not agree. They even see maybe a few from their perspective mistakes, because it's not academic in their sense, but they see that, yeah, it's very interesting topic first. Second, it's good that people are interested in such topics, and even that way of lost civilizations, according to them, is a good way of promoting history, to getting people being interested in history, because when it's boring, people are not that interested. So they were actually positive to some extent about my book, and they said that I should be writing, but then I need to be only critical, but I can write on such topics scientific articles, and I will be writing the first one on the flat similarities, because they said that it's huge, and they were shocked when I gave a presentation about similarities between flat stories in Mesopotamia, India, Bible, and other. And I want later to dive into this topic of Atlantis from a historical perspective, because what I've learned, again, I'm positively shocked. That's why I wanted to update a bit. Before we were talking about lost civilizations, lost history, and everything. And right now I want to show people that it's not like these huge shouters on the internet, these debunkers are telling you. It's not that academia in all of everywhere looks like that. It's not like that. Or with this crazy conspiracy, Smithsonian Institute, Discover Apps, Zahi Hawass, and others. It's not all like that. And academia is open, but academia, historian, is like being, I don't know, a mechanic, or being, let's say, a doctor. If you're a doctor and you need to, let's say you have patient whose life is in danger, maybe you can, let's say, cure him in your own manners because you're the greatest doctor. But for you to be safe legally, maybe you need to know, okay, he will be good. I need to know to go according to the instructions, according, to what I need to do as my profession. But I could, let's say, okay, I will just, do that, give him this one thing and he will be good. But I, need to go through all of this, bureaucracy and stuff like that to be safe, but I will do the case. So the same as with historian. Historian is like a job of a person who needs, to not have actually any opinion on history. He needs, not to take sides. He needs to just, as objectively as possible, look at the evidence, at the sources, what we have, in order to reconstruct the times to show how they might be. So again, if let's say you are a historian with an opinion of Atlantis, it's your personal opinion, but you shouldn't have it because it's your job. Let's say the same if you're a lawyer or someone. You need to be,
Yeah,
very
you have,
objective,
yeah.
put your emotions or your beliefs
Mhm.
aside and look at everything. So the same is with historian. It's just a job. It's not, again, because plenty of shouters, debunkers, popularizers of science say science is going for the ultimate truth. And I think in previous conversations I mentioned it plenty of times that science is nothing close to truth. It's, just a way of objectively looking at different stuff. It's much complicated than that, but it's not going for the truth. And even right now when I'm learning about philosophy of history methodologies of a historian at the university, we are being told that the job of a historian is not to go for the truth about our past, but just, to compare the sources, be critical about the sources and show that, it may not be as the sources. So it's never about historians knowing the truth about their past. No, it's just, complete, it's like intellectual thing. It's not
Right.
about, spiritual, metaphysical truth.
No, it's a matter of finding the whatever evidence possible, and that will come from old documents, that will come from, and I mean, again, there's probably so much information in hidden libraries around the world, or private libraries, is what I should say. But there's also ancient libraries, like, the one in Tibet, like the one in Romania, these ancient libraries of scrolls, and the Vatican is loaded, but they're just like, we don't have the capability, maybe now with AI, because we don't have the capability of translating it all as
Hmm.
well. And some of those are said to have come from the ancient, Library of Alexandria, things that were just, again, saved because conspiracy says the church burned it down, but who knows? Who knows? So, they've got all the good stuff, but I'm sure it's all out there at some point, and it's a lot of digging, it's a lot of researching, it's a lot of cross-referencing and cross-referencing again, and you keep going until it's as definitive as you could possibly, as you can possibly find it to be. And that's not easy. You have a bit of a job ahead of you for this stuff, because I think also of all of the conspiracies and all of the online, sofa researchers, as I call them. But, sometimes it's all you have. I love hearing people's perspectives and opinions. Um, I love that there's interest, because when the interest stops, then what do you do with it when you find it? You know. Um, okay, a couple of questions. If deja vu and lost civilizations point to reoccurring patterns, what future timeline do you think we're most likely entering? One of collapse, rediscovery of ancient knowledge, or maybe something else?
That's actually a great question. And again, about my book and Deja Vu, Cyclical
Michael's
Time,
loaded.
because yeah, the title, as I said, Deja Vu has everything already been. My book is mostly about lost history, but it points to the cyclicality of time. It points, that just as our modern civilization can vanish, maybe in the past other vanish,
Mhm.
but also about the cyclical both beliefs of our ancestors, but also more and more physical theories about that everything in the universe is cyclical, even the universe itself, that the Big Bang is cyclical and stuff like that. And in
Mhm.
my book, I show a few examples of truly repeated history, but it's not like exactly repeated. Let's say 1,000 years from now will be another cycle talking about the same thing, but just in a little bit scenario. It's
Mhm.
mostly that similar archetypes, similar motives, similar personalities, at power. and similar events are happening again, but in different situations. And according to the zodiac cycle, which I think is about the cyclical history and may be about something, spiritual, metaphysical, about everything, and maybe point to reincarnation, because why history is repeating itself in similar patterns, because maybe we need to again relive these patterns or something like that. So I think that analyzing cases of cyclical history may be one of the best physical, material evidence for some kind of metaphysical, spiritual phenomena. And when it comes to what I believe about current timeline, I think that it can change at any time. There may be a huge shift at any moment. And I think even when it comes to my own, let's say, spirituality or something like that, that I had, for instance, plenty of prophetic dreams to some extent that were showing minor events from the future that were so improbable to occur that it was beyond like my mind just making scenarios that could later be real. No, I had my own spiritual journey of some kinds,
Yes.
and I think that they were non-physical, these dreams, and prophetic in the sense that they were showing me the future. But from my own spiritual experience, I see that there are things that are, let's say, 80% set in stone, but still 80% or maybe 90%, as people believe in twin flames, who you will marry, etc. But from my own perspective, it is that it's still very, very, fluid, and everything can change at any time, according to our wills, not like egoistic,
Correct.
but as a collective. So I cannot say. I think that I'm positive about the current times. I'm positive about how things are going since, let's say, last 5 or 7 years or something like that. And I think that humanity was already much lower than nowadays, maybe 50, 70 years ago during the world wars, or even during the medieval times, Middle
Yes.
Ages, Dark Ages as they are called. I even believe that they may be the Kali Yuga of the Hindu, but it's one of the interpretations. There are plenty of them. So I cannot say about
Yeah.
how it will be right now, but I think everything can be changed. I think that yes, everything is cyclical, and I think it's, like, similar even from my own experience to karma. Karma, we think, oh, it's something, oh, I will do to you something bad and I will have an bad event in my life, or some people will treat me as badly as I was treating them. But karma in ancient Eastern knowledge, spiritual knowledge, is much broader term. For instance, there are different types of karma. There is something called runanubandha, which is a natural karma of our organism, like DNA, primitive karma, like our desires or something. And you cannot that easily get rid of that. Maybe some yogis can get rid of that, meditate and something, but even it is called in the Hindu thought that this Ranubandha can be good for us in our day-to-day lives, because we may see, oh, I have good genes to, do that, or I have good genes to do something else. Maybe I have great genes to be, let's say, an athlete or something. So it's nothing bad. The same with karma. And I think the karma is something that we can compare to modern idea of memory. And it is often called in modern interpretation of Hinduism that without karma there wouldn't be even a universe, because if there was no kind of memory like in physical laws of how matter is being governed and creates different things, physical, or there wouldn't be a DNA, so we couldn't be physically like stable as beings, maybe we would be fluid or something. There wouldn't be an universe. So we need
Yes.
some kind of karma. Karma is something that make things last, like universe. Without karma there would be a universe. Karma in the universe terms would be all the laws of physics that are governing how matter is behaving, so we can have at least temporary experience that lasts, and not that everything is fluid. And it compares to, for instance, astral realms or spiritual realms, in which, from
Yes.
descriptions of people, everything is fluid. Nothing is like very, very dense. So maybe that's why everything here in this dimension is dense and heavily karmically, we can say. But it's not that it's bad. And I think that the same with this idea of cyclical history and why we're living in such times, why bad things are happening, is that we or some of us need these things to happen again. We need to have similar, let's say, friends. We need to live in similar, sometimes dysfunctional families. Maybe we won't, because we have sometimes as people toxic traits. We know that from psychology, that sometimes we want toxic people, let's say, in our lives or something. We like that. Some people like making bad things, etc. These are natural things. So maybe we as souls, infinite possibilities of how we can be, maybe we want to experience that to some extent. Maybe we need to, maybe we are sad. Let's say I lost a huge thing in my life that I could have, and I want, let's say, to experience it again. So maybe that's why everything is cyclical. And I see that, okay, there is negative karma and negative stuff in all of that, but I see also positive, that maybe I want to relive this thing again and things like that.
Well, you may have to relive it,
Yeah.
it has to,
But
it has to be
maybe I
resolved,
don't
right?
need to do that. Let's say, because
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, Earth is a prison planet" and stuff like that,
There's tons
or
of
you need
things
to
about that. Yeah.
reincarnate again and be a slave or be killed
Yeah.
or something. I think that it may be even from our own soul deepest desire. That, let's say, I did this person something bad,
And I
and
want you to
maybe
solve it for
I
me.
want to,
Yeah.
okay, you
Make it
can right now treat me badly in another lifetime or something, or I
Yeah.
want to experience such suffering because I made people suffer. So maybe it is also
Yeah, it's a
internal.
personal journey, right? The second part of what Michael was saying, looking ahead, how do you believe humanity's growing awareness of our forgotten past will shape the next few decades or centuries?
Yeah, I think that the paradigm shift is coming, and I'm optimistic. I think that maybe in 20, maybe in 50 years, Atlantis could become a knowledge. I don't think, exactly Atlantis as described by Plato is the same with, other mentions, let's say mentions of ancient Sumer or Egypt. They are very often in the ancient times, they were mentioned, with megalomania or something. So I don't think that it will be exactly, but I think that paradigms will be changing. We'll be discovering more and more about our past on Earth, maybe beyond Earth, who knows? And I think this growing awareness can lead us, to be more enlightened, to some extent, just as we are, just as we have become throughout the last few hundred years, from being a bit primitive, being bad, all the wars, there are still wars, conflicts, and everything. But I think that people are much more aware, much more enlightened in this manners, not to harm, let's say, animals and things like that. And I think that, all of these discoveries, it will also shatter this, and it may be something connected to the idea of Age of Aquarius that's coming. Aquarius is a bit rebellious, that the idea of that this is officially true, these are authorities, this may collapse in the future. Because if we see that, okay, everything that conspiracy theories were telling is becoming true, maybe in 100 years, 50 years or something, people will see, okay, so maybe we should never trust authority, government, and stuff like that. And I think it may have huge consequences. We are speaking about history, and people in the mainstream thinking, oh, history is just history, we cannot learn from history or something like that. But I think it may shatter, and it may have huge consequences on the entire planet, on the entire humanity, and how we live, how we are governing ourselves, and things like that.
I would agree with you. And as far as, oh, it's just history. Do you ever notice how history has a way of repeating itself? We don't learn.
Yes, yes.
We don't learn. And when you're getting into natural cataclysm and battles and so on, and war, I mean, how much archaeology, how many of these incredible pieces of history have just been destroyed?
Yeah, in the
There's
Middle East.
yeah, there's just so much. So now, where do you plan? Like when you're looking at places, like ancient Sumer, Mesopotamia, getting to places like Iraq and Iran, the tomb of Gilgamesh, wasn't that just recently discovered? Was that a
Yeah, a few years ago, yes,
yeah,
yes. Again, another mythological king.
yeah, yeah. So they found somebody because I'm speaking of ancient Sumer, because he would have been considered ancient Sumerian. Is that correct?
I think people haven't called themselves like that back then.
Yeah.
They weren't that attached to the idea of nation. It was either that I'm of this city, of this region, or of this race,
Right.
because there are different, not maybe racial but linguistics groups back then, or that they treated entire Middle East, entire Mesopotamia as the entire world. So it wasn't
Right,
like
right.
I'm
It would
Sumerian
be a lot of ancient
later.
people. I have ancestors who were called the name. It's usually the last name of, for example, if you lived by the red tree, Jonathan by the red tree or of the red tree, or it was always very like, yeah, these little labels. Okay, that's interesting. So where are we going? Because we've got about 15 minutes left. So your research now, you are delving into heavily into Mesopotamia, ancient
Yes,
Sumers.
let's go with Mesopotamia and how it connects to the Bible, the flood, because I think these are the
Okay.
things that are very often interesting people, how the
Okay.
Bible and all these
Yes.
stories,
Yeah.
giants, Nephilim, the creation of the world, the famous flood, how it
Mm.
connects. And I'm
Yes.
researching right now it heavily, and I could say that most of the Genesis is a plagiarism from ancient previous Mesopotamian sources. And
Oh.
we know right now, because plenty of people are, for instance, comparing the biblical narrative of the flood and everything, comparing it with the Mesopotamian versions of the flood story and saying, oh, this is showing us that the flood was real because both Bible and Mesopotamia are talking about that. No, it's not like that. It's that the biblical version, it was shown, time and time again, is very, very late when it comes to the ancient times. It's from between 500 BC to even 300 or later BCs. And
Mm.
imagining 3000 BC of the ancient Sumer, it's very, very late. And we know very, very well that, by analysis between, the biblical sources, ancient Mesopotamian sources, that biblical Old Testament tradition is heavily influenced by
Mm.
Mesopotamia and what was going on there. And I could even say maybe it's, too much because plagiarism is like maybe bad word, but I would say it was a huge, huge copy plagiarism from previous Mesopotamian sources. And we see that, how, I don't know, some people would call it stupid, some people call it like maybe that they were not very careful with copying these texts, because for instance, the name of Noah, the biblical flood hero Noah, was probably a copy of not a name, but of just an epithet of a previous biblical of previous flood story hero Atrahasis from ancient Babylon. And epithet, I meaning, the description. Like, let's say I don't remember which one it was correctly. I will be, writing everything down soon, but epithet description, like, let's say Atrahasis the Great, and the Great is Noah, and they are using it as the main story hero. So they either were very quickly copying these texts, or they weren't literate very good, they weren't
Mm.
very well versed in this language. And you see such things, even, Edin is, all from Mesopotamia. It all comes from Mesopotamia. There are plenty of, pearls like that. And they, took from Babylon, from Assyria, from Persia even. Maybe the idea of the Garden of Eden was not from the Mesopotamia, from Sumer, but from Persia. It's, very well threaded. I'm starting with the flood, but I've already have seen tons of connections, and
Mm.
it's, very interesting, how they were doing that, and how even not stupid, but how, maybe not intelligent, maybe not very well versed in this language they were, that they even used the epithet of the main hero story of the flood to use as, their name in the Bible. Even,
Mhm.
when it comes to the flood story, it's that, when the flood is there, Noah is on his ark with his family, he's sending two birds, first bird is coming back, so it means that he couldn't find a safe place to land. He's throwing a
Mhm.
bird away from the ark, he's coming back, so there is still waters everywhere, and there is no place for the bird to be safe, so he went back. Then Noah sends another bird, and then this bird isn't coming back, which means he found
Fine.
safe place. So
Yes.
then Noah knows, oh, the flood will be over soon. It's the same with one of the oldest text, the Gilgamesh. There's Utnapishtim, who is again sending but 3 times a bird, and last time is not coming back, so we know the flood is over. It's even the these details, of
Mhm.
sending the bird, of the name, or even taking how many people were taken onto the ark. Noah took his wife, 3 sons, and 3 wives of his sons, so 7 people. And the same, in India, Manu, the first man, took 7 rishis, 7 sages. 7 sages are also briefly but not very exactly mentioned as being taken onto the ark in the ancient Mesopotamia. There are plenty of connections, so
Mhm.
Bible took much from these texts. And the same, there is right now a conspiracy in the alternative history niche, as maybe I can call it like that, that the Atlantis was, let's say, not 10,000 BC, but 8,000 BC, because these, let's say, all of these datings of the Sumerian kings list hundreds of thousands of years are not solar years, but lunar years. There are
Mhm.
huge conspiracies like that. And I
Mhm.
wanted, to check out what academics are showing about that. And it was long debunked in the academia that, it was interpretation of Christians, early Christians, because they couldn't, compare. Let's say Bible is telling us that the word is 6,000 or 4,000 years old, and the
Mhm.
biblical people were the mostly living, let's say, 9,000 something years, and, in the Mesopotamian or Egyptian sources is tens of thousands of years. So they couldn't accept it within their paradigm, so they thought of the idea that the ancients were counting the days in the lunar years. So 1 year, our solar year is 365 days, but one lunar year is one lunar cycle, so less than a month, about 28 days.
Mhm.
So in one full hour year, solar year, you have 13 years. So you need to divide everything by 13. So 9600 BC by 13, it's
Mhm.
very recent past, not that much long ago.
Mhm.
So yeah, this is from the news, this is from what's going on. But coming back to the flood, it's very also interesting that all of these earliest sources about the flood, not the biblical but the Mesopotamian, there are plenty of them, the
Mhm.
Gilgamesh, Atrahasis, and others. They're telling us that, okay, this ark went somewhere in the mountains, maybe not the Ararat like in the Bible, but on the mountains of Zagros, Taurus, so on the northern part of Mesopotamia. And interestingly, from this highlands, the Neolithic Revolution started. Not from the side of Mesopotamia lowlands between the twin rivers. The Neolithic Revolution, 9000 BC, started from the areas according to Mesopotamians, on which the flood was,
Mhm.
the ark after the flood was there, and they had some ritual, and that's how civilization started again. So they were right, maybe even randomly, that
Yeah.
civilization started there.
I'm kind of funky with that because, I mean, it would take a long time for wood to petrify, and this is what
Hmm.
they're trying to say happened at this location. What are your thoughts on the location of the Ark, of a photo that was captured on Mount Ararat in World War II by pilots and later verified when satellite technology became a thing? Military got pictures, and there was a Chinese expedition that were
Hmm.
inside of this structure, and they could see stalls and the wood. I mean, it was all still intact because it's in ice. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Even here in Poland, we had recently some people claiming to have visited the Ark, and they were showing some pictures. But interestingly, they were only showing pictures. They haven't even shown how it looks outside. They were showing, pictures of small pieces of wood, and then of the inside, which something looked like a small chamber within the Ark or something, a small part of the Ark. And I haven't researched it heavily, but I've seen plenty of debunkings that some, Christian apologetics and very religious people want, to show that there is this ark. There is probably one nearby the Arat mountain, one fake that was being
Mm.
created somewhere in the last century, and we know it's fake. They used, techniques to get the wood older, but I don't know, maybe there is one there that is real.
The World
But
War
we
II
do not have.
pictures is pretty compelling,
Yeah, but
but it's
maybe it was this one that was a little bit fake. I know that there is one that is being fake, and that's why people who are claiming to have visited it doesn't
mhm.
show, all the entirety of them. Just show,
Yeah,
small thing that was created
the
later by
Chinese
humans.
team The
But
Chinese
maybe one is
was
true there.
videoing. Yeah, they were videotaping, but and it's split in half sometime in the last couple of 100 years. Like it seems to have split in half. It's in sections, but
We
the
can date the wood, so probably we
yeah.
should date it. Then the
Yeah. Well,
chronologically.
I think people have actually taken wood from it. They should date it. Maybe that's why you're not seeing a whole lot of it. But I know that the government has basically put it off limits to further archaeology as well. They don't let people go up there anymore. But another story with the other location, um, and this was an archaeologist friend of mine who was on the show, and he said they found there was a man who found the graves of Noah and his wife allegedly in a neighboring town from where they figure the ark is, and of course it got ransacked. He goes because he went public with the information, and they basically just pillaged the graves.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually a common occurrence. I've heard at my university here in Poland the same that when they are digging, they are not telling anyone because, it's very
Yes.
often the case. Yeah, but I mean, we do not have any more proofs than the alleged one that these were real. And
Yes.
I'm open-minded on both sides. Maybe it
Yeah.
was both the Ark and the graves, but maybe, people fabricated it or maybe it was some kind of legend or something.
It's a
I'm open,
curiosity.
but what I say is
Yeah.
I don't know what is true about this.
Yes. But and that's of course what is part of your journey is to try to find this information. Because it's like Carrie says, she goes, oh, it's sort of Noah's Ark was a DNA library of sorts. I've heard that come up many times, not just animals.
Yeah, Mesopotamian sources on which the Bible was based are telling both about the grains, some plants, not only animals. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So it could be a thing. I don't know. I think it's super interesting. I'd love to pick up the talk again on another show if you'd be willing, and
of
just
course.
continue on from your current research and
Yeah.
dig
Maybe
deep.
I wasn't today talking about, the biggest stuff because I've already talked on to other conversations with you, but also I wanted, to update and show the biggest idea behind today's show is that science is catching up as people are telling us things keep getting older. And, this is the whole idea that science is catching up and everything is turning back to be older and conspiracy theories and fringe theories are
Yeah.
being right.
Yes, I love it. I love it, and I'd love to do a part 2 on it, a little bit of a deeper dive in the scientific connection within ancient history. I think it's very important, because there is a lot of there's a lot of different theories that go on out there, and I love to hear it. And science itself has listened to some of these theories and decided, well, let's examine this, and have come forward and said, hey, you know what? This could be something. To me, even if you hear this could be something, it's enough for me because it tells me that it's worth delving into,
Yeah, of course.
right? So there's hope. There's hope. So I have your website here. This is the time you promote yourself. Where can you buy your book? Well, there's many places around the world. And what do you have going on? What do you have coming up?
I think that the best way is to copy and paste my name and surname or type it Aleksander Czeszkiewicz and you will find me on YouTube, on other live streams, shows, interviews, and you can find me on other social media like Facebook, Instagram. And again, my book is found on Amazon, the English version only, so only Amazon's, but US, Canada, UK, Australia, it's Deja Vu has everything already been, but just type my name and surname and you will probably find it. So I think it's the easiest way. Aleksander Czeszkiewicz. Czeszkiewicz. A little bit hard one probably for you, but hope.
That's a tongue
Yeah, and I
twister,
have
Alex.
tons of things going on, and again, I will be researching more from the historical perspective, but I have also plenty of things parallel to that from the alternative, from independent research. Maybe I'll call it very good like that. And my book is not only about lost history, but also about different kinds of spirituality, cyclical time, physics, tons of different topics from plenty of different different areas of knowledge, areas of science, and much of that. And I'm also interested, apart from history, in spirituality, metaphysics, consciousness, how the universe works. So I want try to discover the biggest things, the most interesting things that very often academics are ignoring or not researching that well. I may even I used to have a great presentation, if you ever wanted, with slides about the whole geometry and maths behind our solar system that, in my opinion, may lead us to discovering the matrix code, as we could like it, the
Yeah,
code behind our reality. So
I'm
yeah,
down. I'm
great,
absolutely
great,
down.
yeah.
I'm absolutely down because that's something that's when you think about everything that we can manifest, are we all these incredibly superior um, spiritual beings, or is there something more to it? You can manifest pretty much anything in a matrix, I'm told. So, you
Yeah, we
know,
can talk about that, connecting
uh,
spirituality with physics, but also with ancient texts, because history is never leaving us. And,
yeah.
it's everything has already been. And I'm analyzing heavily in my book, if you're interested, tons of ancient texts, what they are talking about the reality, and you may be shocked about, how similar it is to modern conspiracy theories. I often say that, conspiracy theories started about, at least from the modern sources that we know, 2000 BC in ancient Mesopotamia, actually. So
Yes.
it's all ancient.
It is wonderful. So I thank you for joining me today. It's been an incredible
Thank you too.
conversation. Oh, it's a pleasure. And I'm hoping we definitely we'll bring you back now that we've got this amazing time slot, better accommodate. Everybody who's been in chat, thank you guys for taking time out of your day and hanging out with us. Um, Tomorrow night on the Outer Realm, we welcome author Tim Malone, who's going to be discussing his book Behind the Veil: One Man's Journey from Opioid Addiction to Spirituality and Beyond. He's had encounters with orbs, spirit guides, angels, other mystical entities, and it all began with a little beloved dog named Boo Boo. That's this incredible story. I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, and as per request, this coming Thursday night, Wayne Mallows will be joining me for another open discussion on exploring the incredible world of animals. We will look at intuition, mysticism, animals in the spirit realm, their role in healing, their role as rescuers, and the belief that they are ancient guardians. I think so. I look at my cat, he thinks he's royalty, and I'm just a peasant who's supposed to feed him. But anyway, aside from that, thank you all, and we shall see you guys tomorrow evening. Bye now.
Bye.